And the results were just phenomenal. I mean, we had people that were like putting these multi-decade long chronic diseases into complete remission, stuff that their doctor had told them that they would be on for the rest of their life. They'd be on pills for the rest of their life. And all of a sudden, it's like the disease went away. So that was obviously powerful as a physician, seeing that happen.
I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Hey everybody, one of the questions I'm most often asked when it comes to agriculture is, how do we find your products, or where do we buy local? Folks, the guys at Crofter have been working on solving just that. They've created a marketplace that connects the producers to the consumers. You can get high quality products shipped to your front porch. Also, if you're a producer and you need an easier route to get your product to those consumers, visit crofter.com. Fill out the producer application and become a distributor on that marketplace. Again, that's crofter.com for high quality agricultural products shipped directly to your door. Joining me today is Dr. Shawn Baker. He's an orthopedic surgeon and the author of the Carnivore Diet. Dr. Baker's been an excellent advocate for red meat and for farmers and ranchers across the country. We had an excellent conversation today about the benefits of red meat and what the world's missing out on if they're skipping it. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Dive in. Tell us where you started. Tell us how you got into this fight. You've been an extremely great advocate for red meat and for ranchers across the country. How'd you get involved in this? How'd you get started in it all?
Yeah, well, so my background, I'm an orthopedic surgeon by training. So medical school, residency, surgery, I spent years, fixing broken bones and putting in new knees and hips and shoulders and, sports medicine industry injuries and all those types of things. So I did that. And I sort of for various reasons discovered that I was able to impact people's health by changing diet. Because I went on my own personal health journey, got healthier by changing diet, started applying it to my patients, and suddenly started to see that people who I thought needed surgery didn't need surgery anymore if you just fix their diet, right? So that was kind of a wake-up moment for me. And then I've continued to explore nutrition. I came across these crazy people eating nothing but meat, and I thought they were nuts and crazy and had all the concerns that everybody seems to do. What about scurvy? What about, plant, nutrients? What about fiber? All cholesterol, all those types of things that everybody sort of brings up. And, I basically looked into it to enough degree that I was comfortable myself doing it. And, and then I began to see other people do it. I kind of convinced people to do it, to try it. And the results were just phenomenal. I mean, we had people that were like putting these multi-decade long chronic diseases into complete remission, stuff that their doctor had told them that they would be on for the rest of their life. They'd be on pills for the rest of their life. And all of a sudden, it's like the disease went away. So that was obviously powerful as a physician, seeing that happen. And then so it becomes apparent to me that, look, this is great as long as we got meat to feed people. But, as meat has been under attack for decades now. And it has just sort of gotten into like a fever pitch, over the last few years. I mean, people calling to tax red meat, ban it in schools, asking people to voluntarily cut it out. And if you're not willing to voluntarily cut it out, we're going to force it on you. I mean, there's literally people out there. We're seeing it particularly in Europe where people are saying, look, we're going to enact legislation so that either you can't afford it or it's not available or whatever. We're not going to outright ban it yet, but we're going to continue to do this. And those people are still out there. And I mean, there's been maybe a little bit of a reprieve. I mean, we're getting people are starting to appreciate the health benefits of it and to find out that, no, it's not killing everybody. I mean, it's surprising. I've spoken in front of a lot of cattlemen's groups over the years. And what was really interesting to me is most of the cattle producers were under the impression that, kind of red meat was maybe unhealthy or maybe not the best thing to eat. They needed to eat all these fruits and vegetables and low-fat stuff. And even guys that are producing the food have been brainwashed into believing what they're producing may not be the best thing. And I'm trying to persuade them that no, in fact, what you're producing is probably the healthiest food we have, and we need to um, you know, embrace that. And I've had my sort of interactions with some of the beef industry folks, people at the various cattlemen's groups and national bodies like NCBA and Beef Checkoff, and trying to convince them to look. It makes sense to um, really understand this, and so that's kind of where I am today in a little ways. But I mean, gosh, I think meat is, and I know you talk about lambing. Lamb is incredibly healthy too. I want people to know that that's an incredibly healthy source of meat. I mean, red meat is just spectacular, and we should be seeking to get more of it. Quite
Yeah,
honestly.
no, and it's funny you mention that because a lot of people don't understand how the health benefits of lamb. I mean, you look at the rest of the world in the United States, it's not as consumed as it used to be. I mean, but you travel anywhere else in the world, and that is a mainstay in people's diet. And so in the United States, we've really overlooked that, and it is shown in the domestic sheep industry. I mean, in the 1930s and 40s, there were 56 million sheep in the United States. That was the big time. I mean, the sheep really are what settled the West. But now there are less than 5 million sheep in the United States. But yet consumption is up 12% year over year, but they continue to bring it in from other countries, and they're forcing the domestic producers out. But I think that leads to possibly an industry problem about educating people about the benefits of lamb and about the nature of raising lamb and how good it is for you. And I think to touch on something that you talked about a minute ago, I think there is a growing chatter about the health effects of red meat. I mean, you've got people like Jordan Peterson who talk about his journey with red meat and the healing effects that it had in his life, and big mainstay figures. I mean, Tucker Carlson talks about it quite frequently now. Joe Rogan. I mean, big figureheads that are really changing the discussion on red meat. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think it's the reality. I mean, like I said, when I went on Rogan back in 2017, and then it inspired Jordan's daughter Michaela to do it, and then she obviously influenced her dad
Yeah.
to do it. I mean, this is the sort of thing, and I think, I mean, it's just the reality. And I think we now live in a time of mass information dispersal. We can get information out
Mm.
lightning fast across the world. Obviously, social media, the internet has made this accessible. Now, this is not a new concept. I mean, we've known that. I mean, there was Scottish surgeon James Rollo in the late 1700s was treating diabetes with
Mm.
with all meat diets. I mean, this is something that is by no means new. It's just that in the 1700s you didn't have a way to get this information out to the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you uh, just carrier pigeon or boat or something like that. It's not happening at lightning speed like it
Right.
does today. So we have that, and it is what it is. I mean, you have to be blind if you're on the internet or on social media at all to not see the thousands upon thousands of people saying, "Look, I'm doing this all meat diet, carnivore diet, animal based diet, lion diet, whatever it might be, and I'm eating tons of red meat. And not only am I not getting sick and getting unhealthy, but I'm losing weight. My diabetes is going into remission. My autoimmune diseases are going into remission. My mental health disorders are going into remission, on and on and on." And so, hard to deny that. I mean, it's becoming. When I first started talking about this almost 10 years ago, everybody thought I was
Yeah.
nuts. I mean, there, I was like, it was like 99.99999% of the population thought I was nuts. Now that number is like 99%. So we've made some significant progress, but it's happening rapidly. And I just saw that, um, Kennedy, RFK's in there kind of talking about carnivore diets and their benefits. I'm going to put the governor of West Virginia on a
Yeah.
carnivore diet. A friend of mine, Chris Palmer, is at Harvard curing schizophrenia using a carnivore. And this is being talked about on the national stage by, you know, pretty significant people. So I think a big change is coming now. Um, as you know, well, probably I don't know the situation on lamb, but I know that the beef herd is down. I
Big
mean, we're
time.
down in 1950s numbers, and probably the lamb
They're as
numbers,
low as they've ever
presumably
been.
yeah. So we got to turn that around. It's a national. Brooke Rollins, our new Secretary of Agriculture, we need to figure out a way to beat these numbers back
Yeah.
up. I mean, to bring them back up because 1977, you said in the 30s was when sheep numbers peaked. 77, I think, was when beef numbers were at their
Hmm.
peak. 130 million head or whatever we have. We're down to like 80 something now. So this is a national crisis. We got to
Yeah,
fix it.
and that has been my push. I mean, I'm in politics. Those who follow me know that I was chairman of the Utah Republican Party. I've done a ton when it comes to trade policy and agriculture. And I spoke to Brooke Rollins about this early on, and it is a problem. But for me, this is becoming a national security emergency because we are so rapidly outsourcing our domestic protein production that we're going to be in trouble. And I tell people this: agriculture is not like a factory. Once it's gone, it's gone. You don't, once a family farm's sold and they've built homes over it, it's over. You don't get that back. You don't move it somewhere different. It is gone. And it needs to be taken seriously on a major level, or we're going to find ourselves in a crisis. Because right now, I mean, this is something that nobody ever correlates, and it's really fascinating to me. Over the past 10, 15 years, and RFK is talking about it right now, we have seen the quality of our food decline, and I agree with this wholeheartedly. But what's funny is nobody ever correlates the mass number of imports, the food that we're bringing from other countries now. As of 2023, the United States became a net importer of agricultural products. We don't feed ourselves anymore. But yet nobody's correlating the fact that these giant amounts of imports that are coming into our country and the decline in the quality of our food. Yet here we are. To me, it seems common sense. Let's start letting American producers compete on the world stage, and I think we're starting to see that now.
Well, I just saw a thing. I think Trump was talking about, Australia. We're importing $3 billion worth
Yeah.
of Australian beef, and he said, "Hey, look, that ain't good for our U.S. farmers. We need to do that and change that situation around." Which I think makes sense. I mean, I know we had I don't know what your thoughts are on the mandatory country of origin labeling,
100%.
the MCOOL thing that was pulled off in, what is it, 2015, 2016. We had it on the books for like what, 10,
Yeah.
15 years, so we knew where we were getting our beef from. And so if there were those people that want to buy American, um, they knew where they were getting it from. And now, as you can raise a cow in Namibia, and as long as it's slaughtered, or no, as long as it's processed or anything,
If it
as long
changes
as
a
it's shipped into a
box.
package, right, it's product of the USA right now, which is misleading. And I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that, and I can't understand why they. I guess they said it was harming free trade or something along those lines. I mean, I know there's a concern around what's going on with the big four packing companies versus a producer. I know there's always this tension and friction going back and forth with that, but I agree. I mean, we cannot outsource our food production to overseas and expect to be a sovereign nation. I mean, it will come back to dramatically harms, because what happens if somebody's pissed off us, and all of a sudden we're getting all our food from South America and Africa and Australia, and they say, hey, look, we don't like you guys. We're gonna dial back. That's gonna have a problem. That's a
Yeah,
real
it's a
problem.
national security issue for me. Everybody's worried about chips being made overseas. Well, what about your food? For me, I don't want to see my children subject to eating solely stuff that comes from China. And that brings me back to another point you touched on is, I mean, for years and years, we went back and forth, and I found it really comical. And even at a young age, I didn't understand it. And that was eggs. Like, it was, eggs are bad for you. Oh, eggs are good for you. Oh, butter's bad for you. Oh, butter's good for you. Margarine this, butter that. And we've gone back and forth. And now we've come to find out that the food pyramid is an absolute scam, and they lied to us for years and years. And everybody talks about the studies. Why aren't we seeing studies on this? Why do you think it is that for years and years there have never been accurate studies on consuming red meat? Why have there not been base reports on why red meat is good for us? Because for years we've been told it's not.
Well, I mean, again, if you look at like who would stand to benefit from a study that would say beef is healthy, well, obviously the meat industry would. I mean,
Yeah.
that's clear. I mean, you can't help but see it. But the problem is, I mean, through the USDA. I mean, if you look at what the USDA does, the USDA is in charge of what? Selling U.S. commodities. I mean, they want to sell soybeans, they want to sell
Yeah.
corn, they want to sell sugar beets, they want to sell everything, and so they have to have this balance. It's kind of ridiculous that the food guidelines, our national dietary guidelines policy, comes from an organization that's designed to sell as much corn as possible and all this stuff. And again, I get it. I get if you're a corn farmer in Iowa, you want to sell your corn, whether it's going to ethanol or cattle feed or whatever it might be. But that's just not how we should be eating. And I think that like my frustration was like, look, I'm out here telling people to eat a bunch of beef and maybe only eat beef. And I'm seeing all these tremendous things. And I approached the folks at Beef Checkoff and said, hey, look, guys, let's fund some damn
Yeah.
studies. And they're very reluctant to, because they're like, well, we fall under the guise of the USDA. And USDA says, well, you can't disparage other commodities, and you got to work within these tight confines. And so that has been, now I will tell you that there is going to be an NCBA funded study, partially funded study, I should say, in line with South Dakota. They're going to look at some carnivore diet studies finally, after me hectoring people
Good.
for several years now, because I'm like, and it's a starting point, and then hopefully more will come. I think with the new NIH director, Jay Bhattacharya, hopefully he'll be open to doing some of this stuff. I mean, to saying, look, we need research, because the answer has been up to this point, who's got the funding? Well, the pharmaceutical companies do. And all they want to do is pay for drug studies so they can make these next billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drugs. Whereas you're saying, wait a minute, nutrition can solve a lot of these problems. Why don't we study this? Well, no one's going to get rich off of that. And I mean, that's a backwards way of thinking about it. What about healthy people? What about healthy people that can turn up to work and be productive, and not not being in the ER every 6 months with their diabetes complications? So I think hopefully we're getting a change in the mindset on that. But yeah, I mean, up to this point, I mean, you see like, Silicon Valley, and they've got all these venture capitalists sticking money into alternate proteins, because, they look at the meat industry as like a $1.5 trillion industry worldwide. And they're like, we want a piece of that. We want to expand the market into these alternative proteins. So now you're going to eating, soybean gruel and bugs
Crickets.
and lab grown concoctions and stuff like that. And it's like, it's all about money. It's not about human health. And I
Yeah.
mean, I think this is something that we have to realize. We shouldn't be profiting on human health and nutrition. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't mean profiting, but I mean in a way that leads to sick people. It just doesn't. It's not good for society. So I
Yeah.
mean, this is something that I think is intuitively obvious, but I mean, gosh, you get people that, you know, I mean, there's people who kill people over $20, and you talk about what are they going to do for a couple
Billion.
$1 billion? I mean, there's a lot of nefarious activity
Oh,
that
and,
occurs.
and for years it's been, oh, that's not the case. No, no, but now, no, the conspiracy theorists have really been right up to this point. But you touched on something in there that I think is also important: is this big investment you see from these tech companies or people who made their money in tech space investing into fake meat and these alternate lab grown proteins. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why anybody thinks that red meat can be bad for you and naturally produced cattle, naturally produced lamb, whatever it is not healthy for you. But yet you're willing to eat something that's grown in a petri dish. And how long until the studies come out that show how detrimental that's going to be for people's health? Because I look at it from the outside and I'm like, this cannot be safe. This cannot be healthy. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the reality is, there's been, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars poured in from venture capital money into some of these companies, these startups, these plant, and mostly they've all
Yeah.
failed. I mean, which is interesting to see. All these companies have, because the public largely has rejected the concept of ultra processed, ground up soybeans and calling it meat. That's not the case. Now, there's people out there saying, well, if we grow it in a petri dish and it's a lab, it's an animal cell, it's the same thing. But I think there's just as many people that are equally mortified, because they're looking at, like, what is this? You're going to turn this immortal cell line, the same thing we do. We've got breast cancer cells that have been alive since the 1960s. These are basically cancer cells. It's the same
Yeah.
sort of, in many ways, the same sort of technology. And so I don't know, honestly. There's an interesting fellow by the name of Julian Mellonton, and he's pretty heavily involved in the sort of the consumer nutrition industry. And he's talking about how all of these companies have failed, and the desire is not there, and the likelihood of even scaling. Because you think about how much meat we consume here in the United States, and I don't even know what the lamb stats are. I know beef; it's only like, most people are shocked to learn this, that the average American consumes, this is not me, I eat way more than that, but the average American is consuming around 2 ounces of red meat
Yeah.
daily, or beef anyway. Lamb, I'm sure it's
Yeah. They're
not
less
even,
than a pound a
two
year per
grams or
person.
something like. Yeah, so it's not even, you're in a neighborhood of a couple grams a day at most. And so to say that that is the problem is ridiculous. But the reality is, even to mimic that much amount of meat, it's just not technically feasible on these lab-based companies, because all they're going to find out is they're going to be some like super ultra niche high-end restaurant, and that's about
Yeah.
it. That's probably the only place it'll ever go. I don't think it's going to be dominating the supermarket shelves. I don't even know if we can get to the supermarket in any significant way. I think we're going to reject that, as we should. I mean, as you know, there are some states that are outlawing it. I mean, like Italy has, I think, outlawed it. I think Florida might have outlawed it. I think another couple states have talked about outlawing that, or at least they've got bills in their legislature. And if a couple states outlaw it, it becomes very difficult to run a national company, because then you're like, okay, I can't do business in this state or that state. Does it even make sense for that? And I agree. I mean, this is stuff that, um, this, and this is something that I think they're looking at, this so-called generally recognized as safe designation for food chemicals. I mean, in that legislation came back, it was 1940s or something like that, where they said, we're gonna generally recognize whole natural foods as safe foods because we've been eating them for thousands of years. And so that was bastardized into any company that introduces any chemical product, just uses that label and says, we gave it to some rats and they didn't die right away, therefore safe for human consumption. And that's literally, I mean, without much exaggeration, what's going on. And so now we got all this chemical, God knows what it does to us. I mean, well, we can look around and see what it does to us. We look at the population. Everybody's fat, sick, depressed, on medications, autoimmune diseases, cancers, all these things through the roof. And we're wondering why. And like you said, we've been eating sheep and beef and lamb for thousands and thousands and thousands of years prior to all this crazy chronic disease. So it's clearly not that
Yeah,
stuff.
no, absolutely. And it was funny because I was listening to Jordan Peterson talking with a doctor from Brigham Young University the other day, and in that interview they were talking about glucose and the way that glucose is affecting your body and how to really combat that and deal with these things. We're talking type 1, type 2, and even Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes, whatever you want to call it. And being able to treat that with fats and proteins. I mean, I think the studies are coming our direction. So in your studies and in your journey with red meat, how have you found that ability to treat those types of diseases that are really becoming chronic epidemics? How have you seen those affect? I kind of want to dive into the science side of it a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, for instance, autoimmunity. So, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, myasthenia gravis, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Many of them seem to share a common, starting point through gut health. And we see this phenomenon of gut hyperpermeability. So the gut lining is damaged somewhere, so that it allows um, foreign particles to get in that aren't supposed to be absorbed. Our gut, believe it or not, our gut is the largest interface we have with the external world. Most people don't realize this, but our mouth, our esophagus, our intestines, the inside of that is external to the human body, right? So we have this interface, this barrier, and we have this very selective membrane that keeps certain things in. If we didn't bring things in, we would starve to death, right? We got to be able to bring
Sure.
things in, as opposed to like our skin. Our skin interfaces with the environment, but it largely keeps stuff out of us. Our gut's different; it's designed to bring things in, but when that barrier is altered in some ways, you start getting all these, unusual, particles coming in, bacterial lipoproteins, polysaccharides, and things like that, and that causes this inflammatory reaction, this immune reaction, and then we develop this autoimmunity. So by restoring the gut, so removing the things that damage it, and we talk about all those millions of chemicals that everybody's ingesting every day, whether it's plastics or thickeners, emulsifiers, preservatives, pesticides, stabilizers, whatever it might be that's damaging our gut. By removing that stuff is number one helpful. The other thing is red meat is just incredibly nutritious. I mean, it's got everything we need as a species. I mean, why do we eat in the first place? We need essential amino acids, we need essential fats, we need energy, we need vitamins and minerals, and beef, lamb, whatever is going to provide all of those things. To the degree we need them, believe it or not. I know a lot of people say, well, there's no vitamin C and all that stuff, and we can definitely talk about the uniqueness about that. But so that's how that seems to work with that. Now, when it comes to things like diabetes and metabolic disease, I mean, absolutely, when we go on this grain-based, high-carb diet, which we've been on as a species for about the last 10,000 years, and has been accelerated rapidly since about World War
Yeah.
II, and then '70s when Earl Butz says "Go big or go home" type of stuff. We've basically started pouring all this ultra processed, highly refined carbohydrate into the food supply. All that corn, all that soybean, all that whatever sugar beets and things like that just dominate the landscape right now. So everything's got corn in it for the
Sure.
most part. Everything's got, and we've got all the oils that we derive from rapeseed and soybeans and cotton seeds and God knows what else. So that's become our food supply. And 70% of the kids' diet right now is ultra processed. 60 something of the adult diet is something like that. So everybody's becoming diabetic, pre-diabetic, metabolic, syndrome, hyperinsulinemic. And so by consuming a diet rich in beef without those things, it changes your appetite. Now, there's this craze for these new drugs, these GLP-1 drugs,
Yeah.
Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, all these things, which impact our satiety. Well, beef does the same thing, but in a physiologically appropriate way, without all the side effects that come with that. And so this is why so many people, they stabilize their blood glucose better. They're not consuming all this. I mean, the reality is none of us are designed to eat
Mm.
powders. You think about what do we do with the grains? We turn them into flour, we turn them into sugar, we turn them into, crackers and things like this. It's all powder. And it dramatically changes the absorption characteristics of those foods. This is not what our human body was
Mm.
designed for. I mean, if you and I were to go hunting, wherever, Utah, Washington, we might find a few things. We find some animals, maybe find some berries or things like that. We're not going to run into any powder. There's no powder trees. There's no like powder out
Yeah.
there. You've got to, even in the old days with a mortar and pestle, it take you a tremendous amount of work to turn something into powder. Today with modern machinery, I mean, you just powderize everything instantly to the extent that half the food supply is there. So that has a significant effect, because when you absorb powder, the absorption characteristics are very changed. You absorb it much more rapidly than you're used to, and that leads to these rapid, uncontrolled blood sugar swings. And so meat is something that breaks down very slowly in our gut by design. Our gut slows down when you eat a big old steak, because it says, I want to extract every bit of nutrition from that. And that's why you slowly absorb energy, and you just feel more stable. This is what I continually hear from people, that their energy stabilizes. They're not hungry all the time. They can go, they eat steak and eggs for breakfast, and then they don't want lunch. They're like, I'm good. I'm full. I don't need it. And so it allows people to lose weight easily without effort. Blood glucose normalizes, gut health improves. I mean, it's across the board, very, very
Yeah,
useful.
no, and what I find fascinating, talking about the powders and talking about grains and simple carbs, anybody who has ever fed sheep or fed cattle, I mean, when you look at the rations that are created to feed them, the goal is to make them as fat as you can, as fast as you can. And when you look at that, what do you feed them? You feed them grains that are turned into a powderized form. That is the fastest way to get them as fat as we can. And you look at the food pyramid and the lies that they've sold us for years, they have literally created the perfect ration to fatten people. And we wonder why we're in the state we're in. This is
Yeah,
blows my mind.
it's like the TMR for people or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like it was just it's powdered grains, and everybody
Oh
gets
yeah,
fat.
I
For
mean,
sure.
and again, if you want to optimize the absorption of corn or barley or anything to these animals, what do? You grind it, you crack it, you roll it, whatever that process looks like. That is the fastest way to make them fat. So, I think there is, again, talking about this in a broader sense, I think we're going to see a huge resurgence now that everybody's starting to figure out. And this comes with the ability and the dissemination of information and the free trade of information across the globe. Is now these big companies and the big corporations, they don't control the flow of information anymore. That they can't just run with a simple agenda, because there are alternate voices out there that are now becoming just as big to be able to send that out to the masses. But the next thing I want to talk about is the difference in meats, because I hear a lot of people like, well, what about pork? What about chicken? What about fish? Like, is that the same? And why red meat? So do you want to speak to that a bit? Why red meat? Why lamb? Why beef? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, there's a number of differences. One, I think that, if you look at, obviously if we were to take a piece of pork and a piece of beef or lamb and run the nutritional component, there's going to be differences. In fact, as you probably know, I mean, even different cuts of
Sure.
beef are slightly different in their content. One has more methionine, I mean, even the amino acids are slightly different. So there's some general differences. I think with beef and well, red meat in general, it just has more fat. And fat is, I know we've been scared of fat for so many years. I mean, the USDA, lean red meat can be part of a healthy diet. And they're so terrified of this fat because we've been brainwashed by this saturated fat is causing all this disease. And the reality is it's probably not. So most people gravitate, at least in the context of a carnivore diet, to red meat just because of the fat content. Because when you're not consuming a bunch of processed grain and carbohydrate, you need to get energy. And where are you going to get that energy from? Well, you're not going to get much from protein. You're going to get it from the fat. So fattier cuts of meat tend to dominate in these situations. Now, it's not that you can't have fish or chicken or pork. And some people make a difference about, the fact that beef and lamb are ruminant animals, whereas chicken, a pig is going to be a monogastric, and it's going to have a little bit different implications in some of the how some of their feed is processed. You would know that better than I do as someone who feeds animals. But so there are some general differences. But I mean, I think that in comparison to all the chemical concoctions, the soybean gruel that's on the shelves, beef, lamb, chicken, pork, fish, dairy, eggs are superfoods relative to these things. Now, like I said, if I were to say what do I think is the best one, I'd say probably red meat. I think red meat tends to be the least problematic for people. And there's some people out there that are quite sensitive and have a number of issues. And there are people that have pork allergies and egg allergies and dairy problems. It's very rare where you see somebody has a red meat issue. It's just really unusual. And I look back to how we were raised as a species. And if you think about it, let's just turn the clock back thousands of years, and you give you a spear and say, go get some food. And I can chase birds around, and I'm not going to be very efficient with a spear chasing birds around. So if I can get a big old animal, and back in the day it was elephants, believe it or not. It's really interesting when you look at the history of the human species. I mean, initially we went after these giant tortoises, because you think about a giant tortoise, it's a big, slow walking, giant meat fat thing that can't get away, And what does a tortoise do? Sucks in its shell and hides, and the predators can't get to it. But a human being, you got this big old thing. All I got to do is take a rock, crack the shell, and I'm in. And so we literally wiped out all the tortoises on Earth to a large degree early on in our species history. And then we continue that with what are the biggest, fattest animals? We get mammoths and mastodons and all these things. And then all of a sudden, now we're like, okay, there's not too many of them left. There's too many of us, and it's not a viable food option. So now we've got to figure out, I got to chase these antelopes around, and they're faster and they're leaner. So now we develop bows and arrows and atlatls and things like that. So now, in order to supplement that, to augment the lack of fat, we can crack their bones, get some marrow, eat some brain, maybe get a little visceral fat. But generally, we had to start adding in more and more plants, carbohydrates and things like that. And that's kind of the transition. I know, depending on your audience, some people will say, well, that's all BS because we've only been here for 6,000 years. But regardless, we've been eating meat for a long time. I mean, and that is undeniable. And, even if you read like the Bible, I mean, what do they talk about? The fatted calf, that they wanted to fatten an animal up. Right. Because that was always the food that was deemed to be most nourishing for us. And so I think that's who we are as a species. When we try to deny who we are, I mean, we are savage hunters that eat meat, and when you deny that and say, oh no, we're these gentle creatures that are, we're not herbivores. We're not out there, nibbling on grass for our nutrition, or just, gently picking fruit out of the trees. It's like, why do we have an arm that can throw? I mean, are we throwing rocks at bananas or what? I mean, why are we throwing stuff? We're throwing spears and stuff like that. So anyway, I think the red meat thing, the question around red meat is it's who we are as a species. It's what developed us, really. I mean, to have that big brain, if we look at all other primate species, we have the biggest brains. We also carry the most body fat.
I see.
interestingly. And it's because our body fat is supposed to nourish our brain. Now, a lot of us have way too much body fat. I mean, we turn into people that are unrecognizable, how almost like a different species because of the, as you know, the fattening powers of refined grains and sugars and carbohydrates that just fatten people up like crazy. And maybe some of the oils. We've added all these, damn stupid oils into the diet, which I don't care what you believe, but I can guarantee even 200 years ago, no one was eating soybean oil. It didn't exist, right? So we've
They were
made that.
burning it for the most part. Um, but again, you touched on something there. I want to go back and talk about it a little bit, and that's brain health, because you see this huge. A lot of people nowadays are struggling from mental illnesses or brain health, brain fog, whatever you want to call it, and clearing those things up. That's become a huge topic, not just physical health but mental health as well. And for years we've been taught, oh, cholesterol is bad for you and all of these things. So let's talk about brain health for a second, because last I've checked, and in the research that I've done, your brain is made mostly up of cholesterol and runs on ketones, and those are the things that we need to prevent these illnesses.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely correct in the fact that our brain is 2% of our body mass. It takes up 20% of our energy. I think something like 25% of the cholesterol in our body is located within our brain. Cholesterol is essential for nerve health and neurologic function in many ways. People that have multiple sclerosis, which is a demyelinating condition where the covering of the nerves is the fat covering of the nerves, the insulation, as it breaks down. The only way that can reoccur is in both animals and human studies is by providing people exogenous cholesterol, and you only get that through animal foods. There's no cholesterol in plant foods, right? That.
Yeah.
Hopefully, everybody knows that. But it is something like 20 to 25% of Americans right now are diagnosed with some sort of mental health disorder, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, ADHD, autism, something like it's enormous, and that's not normal. And you think about, how does a society function when fully a fourth of the population has a mental illness? I mean, you can't, and how often do these people interact with each other? You've got two anxious people bumping into each other in the streets, and no wonder we've got all this
Yeah.
disharmony and violence and anger and, fear that's going on because of this. And so nutrition, and this was almost taboo to speak about. I remember talking about this stuff 7, 8 years ago, saying, look, I think that nutrition is impacting people's mental health. And people say, oh, that's crazy. It's trauma. You can't fix depression with a steak. And I'm like, yeah, I think you can. And it's amazing. That has been one of the most amazing things for me to see, is a number of people that have gone to an animal-based or a carnivore diet who have said, look, I was depressed. I was on, SSRIs and lithium and all these other medications. And now I'm off of this and I'm normal. I'm no longer suicidal. I want to live again. And I didn't see this one or two times. I saw this thousands and thousands of times over. And so now we're seeing some research actually in that light, which is confirming what we're seeing clinically. We I mean, the fact that we have so many kids out there that don't know what the hell's going on, don't know what they're doing, don't know who they are, drug addiction, things like that. Part of that's in the nutrition. And it was one of the other things I saw was that, interestingly, people would say that, I went on this carnivore diet, started eating meat, and guess what? I didn't want to smoke anymore,
Wow.
or I didn't feel like I needed to drink anymore, or, you fill in the blank on the drug. It helps. It helps with that. And the thing that's really shocking to me is, I remember when I was living in Southern California, next door to me literally was a halfway house for women that got drug and alcohol issues. So they would, they roll them in about every 2 months. There'd be a new crew. And they'd all be hanging out on the porch, smoking cigarettes, eating pizza, and drinking Coca-Cola. And I'm like, that's not a way to improve your
Yeah.
health. But that's what they do. They give them cheap food, crappy food, and and whatever therapy they're given. I mean, the thing to do is to feed these people appropriately. And if you look at like emergency rooms, a lot of emergency rooms are overrun by psychiatric patients that are off, homeless guys on the street. They're schizophrenic. They come in every weekend, and that is not cheap. I mean, that's millions of dollars a year these people are running up. When you could probably say, look, let's just take this guy and feed him good food for a couple months. Maybe cover some of his general costs, feed him, and literally cure the guy. I mean, that is conceivably doable for a lot of these people. But what do we do instead? Now we just Here, let's hit you with a bunch of tranquilizers, basically, Haldol and Ativan, have you chill out in the corner with your paper scrubs, and we feed you garbage and then kick you out on Monday morning and then see you on Friday
Yeah.
or something like that. So, I mean, yeah, the mental health issue is incredibly, incredibly tied to nutrition.
Yeah, and it's been fascinating to watch that become part of the bigger conversation. That red meat can and is a cure for a lot of it. And as we mentioned before, Dr. Peterson, a lot of the issues he's having were issues with his brain or his nervous system or whatever those were. And getting started on that and listening to his journey about what he had to deal with and part of his addiction, he talks about in the foreword of his new book and curing all those things. And what a difference it made, but also what a difference it can make in our health system, taking care of these people who need that help and those addictions and those cravings and all the things that come along with those. Also, the longevity. I mean, we're seeing a slight decrease in how long people live. My grandpa, my great grandpa lived to be 93 years old. My grandpa to this day is 90 years old. And my great grandpa, everybody was always like, how does he live that long? Like they don't eat very well. They're eating, I mean, every morning religiously, grandpa would take a pan full of mutton grease in his sheep camp. He would take a piece of bread, cut the hole out of the middle of it, crack an egg into the center of it, and fry that bread with an egg in the middle of it in fat. The guy lived to be 93 years old, and he'd have lived longer than that had he not broken his shoulder. But I'm telling you, there is a lot to this longevity thing, and having health and mental health too into the later years of your life. Are there any studies on the longevity side of it and the mental capacity going into later age?
Yeah, yeah. So, for one, I mean, there was a study out of Western Australia back 2 years ago, looked at 175 countries, and they controlled for socioeconomic factors, wealth and education, all these things. And they found that the countries where people ate the most meat live longest. I mean, across the world. So we know that. I mean, there's relationships across the board. There are a number of studies out there that show people with higher cholesterol actually live longer than people with lower cholesterol. Again, this is not what you hear every day, based on, the American Heart Association.
But how many people
that's
are on
reality.
cholesterol medicine? How many Americans?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a huge number. I mean, it's one of the most well-selling drugs in the world. I mean, statin drugs have sold $1 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
and so, we have literally, as you mentioned, our life expectancy is going down. For the first time in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen an actually decrease in life expectancy for the first time ever in the United States. And it's because people are getting sicker and sicker. Our average cholesterol went from about 225 back in the 1960s or 70s to now 200. So we've dropped the national cholesterol level on a population level 20 points, which is huge. And the results are worse, right? Across the board. More diabetes, more obesity, more heart disease, more cancer, more autoimmune disease, more psychiatric diseases. So, I mean, again, it's just the relationships. You can't draw too much into that. But it clearly hasn't, the low-fat craze, which started out in the early 1980s, has not done us any favors. I mean, from a population health standpoint, and certainly if not from an individual standpoint. And I think, you have to realize you can't just treat individuals like you can treat populations. I think you have to, for those people struggling with their own health, I was like, look, you've got to understand what's going on individually with you and not just look at the general recommendations. Now, I think thankfully, I mean, I know, like I said, Kenny's talking about new food pyramid coming in. He's talking about, hey, could they just, I mean, this is something that my friend Nina Teichholz has done a very nice job of documenting the fact that these people sitting on the USDA dietary guidelines committees in the 2021, 95% of them had financial relationships with junk food companies. So it's like, what do you think the results are going to be that they're paying them? So, I mean, hopefully, and in my view, I look at a country like Brazil, who is not necessarily the healthiest country in the world, but their dietary guidelines are this: minimize ultra processed food, eat whole unprocessed food, eat at home, eat with people you love, learn to cook, ignore, marketing. Basically, that's their guidelines. And I think that's all we need to do. We don't need to spend millions and millions of dollars every year to have a bunch of scientists to get together and tell us not to eat saturated fat. I mean, that's a waste of money in my view, and it's not helping. It's not helpful. It's actually harming
No, and some of
people.
the simplest and best
So
advice that I've actually heard lately, and it really struck home to me, was shop around the outside edge of the store. And I believe it was in the podcast with Dr. Peterson. It said shop and eat around the outside edge of the store. You know, your dairy, your meats, your vegetables, whatever it is. It's around the edge. Avoid the things in the center. Avoid those easy carbs.
what? Yeah, well, it's like, you look at the layout of every grocery store. Where's the meat and dairy section? It's always in the back, man. You got to walk through all this
Yep.
crap, all this stuff, all this marketing garbage, all the little brightly colored pink and purple and blue foods, and with all the bright labels on there, to get to the real
Yeah.
nutrition. It's just like, I just there might as well be, rocks and metal parts laying in it. I just walk by this stuff.
When's the last time you've seen a grocery store with T-bone steaks and ribeyes or lamb chops sitting next to the checkout counter instead of candy bars?
Yeah, no, it's candy bars. Yeah, here. I'll tell you some interesting story. I was at a conference. I was actually up in South Dakota, and there was a guy who worked for one of these candy corporations like Mars or something like that, right? And he was telling me candy sales are down significantly. I said, well, why is that? That's interesting. He says because a lot of these grocery stores are adopting self-checkout lines. And because of that, they can't put as much crap there.
Interesting.
So people aren't making these last second buys, these impulse buys. And so what I'm seeing now is if you go to the self-checkout now, they're like precariously stacking Snickers bars and Reese's peanut butter cups on the edges, because they don't have any room. So it's like one of those things. So the candy bar people are really hurting.
Unintended consequences.
And I guess the history of that was apparently like Wrigley's gum, juicy fruit gum that came out of 1920s or something like that. People were stealing that in the store, and because it's such a small thing, they just put it in their pocket and walk out. And so they just, in order to combat that, they stuck it next to the cash register, so people wouldn't steal this stuff. And then that was the beginning of sticking all the candy up there. And so that's why we have that today. So it was an interesting little side, historical.
Now, speaking of impulses and impulse buying and impulse eating, if you were to suggest to people who are trying to get healthy or trying to get a handle on their mental health, I mean, where do they start? What do you suggest? What should people be doing, and how do they do it?
Well, I mean, obviously recognizing the fact that you have power over that. Realize you're not powerless, just irrespective of what your physician might tell you. If somebody tells you, hey, it is what it is, we don't know why it is, take this pill the rest of your life, that's a bad situation to be in. You got to realize that you have a lot of power over this situation. And it's not just only nutrition, but I will tell you that if you don't fix the nutrition, all the other stuff you're going to do is going to be minimally effective, right? So you got to fix that nutrition. You got to feed your brain what it needs. And I will tell you that our brains do better with fat. I mean, than they do with carbs. I mean, for the most part, it depends. It's not necessarily you should be, eating spoonfuls of margarine, but I mean, animal fat that comes with, a piece of lamb or a piece of beef or a piece of salmon or something like that is going to get you what you need for brain health. And I think that, for some people, it's addiction. I mean, there's a lot of people that are addicted to this ultra processed garbage, and those companies know it. They did it intentionally. I mean, I had a woman in her 60s who was a food chemist who came to me and said, I want to work for your company. And I was like, well, what's going on here? And she said, well, my job was to addict people to these foods. I mean, that was literally her job, was to make food addictive. And she was very good at it, and they were very good at it. So you got to deal with this addiction. So you got to realize you're dealing with either, some form of addiction around these foods. And how do you break it? You got to load up on the good stuff. You got to load up on meat and fat until you don't want that stuff anymore. And you might need help. I mean, there's a lot of people. This is what my company Rivero does. We take people that are addicted to food, and we literally support them daily. We have doctors that get it. We have, team members, coaches, apps, technology that help people to get unaddicted to this stuff, so they can maybe for the first time in their life feel normal or feel like they're supposed to.
Yeah. So are we talking one meal a day? Are we talking two? Are we talking three? How much should people be eating? How do they balance that out?
Well, I mean, I can't say an exact number on that because it's going to vary from person to person. But most people, like if they do a carnivore diet, most people gravitate to about 2 meals a day. That's what most people do. Some people might be able to get away with one meal a day. It's often hard to get enough calories in one meal, quite honestly, to fuel yourself for the sort of. I can do it, but I can sit down and put down 6 pounds of steak in one
Right.
meal, so I can do that. But most people aren't going to be able to do that, or don't
want
to
to do that.
Honestly. Yeah, so I mean, it's like, yeah, for most people, you'll find that you go from this grazing, because the average American will start eating at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and they keep eating all day long until about 10 p.m. till they go to bed. I mean, they might be eating 6, 7 times a day. That's not what we're designed for either. I mean, so I mean, I think most people will find 2-ish, maybe 3 meals a day works out pretty well for most people, particularly if you're consuming nutrient dense, fat rich, high quality proteins. It just absorbs slower. It's digested more slowly, absorbs more slowly, but it gives you that steady energy. And I tell people, hey, eat enough, beef, lamb, eggs, whatever, so that you don't want cupcakes or whatever the garbage food might be. Just eat enough so you don't want this stuff. And then once they do that consistently, all of a sudden they don't crave it anymore, which is really freeing, because people say, oh, you're so restrictive because you can't have, Twinkies and Oreos and ice creams and blueberries and whatever it might be. And I'm like, well, guess what? I don't really want that stuff, which was actually liberating, particularly when you talk to people that are food addicts. I had a gal, believe it or not, she was 800 pounds, right? 800 pounds, which is enormous. I mean, it's crazy someone could do 800 pounds. She was so addicted to garbage. I mean, chocolates and cookies and cakes and ice creams. She tried everything. I mean, she tried juicing and vegan diets, and she had gastric banding and all these crazy shake diets. She went carnivore, and she said, you know what? For the first time in my life, I found the off switch. I just didn't need that stuff anymore. And she lost 500 pounds in 2 years. I mean, she dropped 500 pounds just by going carnivore. And I mean, because these people there's a lot of psychological issues going on. There's a lot of addiction issues going on. There's a lot of physiologies going on, but you fix that stuff. And, you give these people the freedom to say, hey, just go eat as much steak as you want, And because, most people, when you, like most people, they go out, most guys, most people like steak, you go to, oh man, I love the steak, but you're like, oh, I gotta moderate it because I don't eat too much because cholesterol and saturated fat. You've been brainwashed by 60, 70 years of marketing that, quite frankly, in my view, the beef checkoff didn't do a very good job combating.
Yeah.
I mean, their job is to market for the beef. It came in 1985, the beef checkoff started. Its job was to market beef. And what happened to beef sales since that time, or average consumption? It's gone nothing but down. How many ranchers went out of business in that time? 100, 200, 300,000, 400,000 ranchers lost their ability to farm. So you got to change that message. Beef is healthy. It shouldn't be a tiny small part of a balanced meal. It should be, this is where your nutrition is. Beef beats diabetes. And these are kind of things that need to come out there. And whether Checkoff wants to do it or the ranchers want to stand up and do it and just say, look, you got to start playing offense on this stuff. Playing defense, because everything, beef's causing, cattle farts are boiling the ocean and beef's causing diabetes, that's bullshit. And we just got to say, no, bullshit. This is the healthiest food there is on the planet. You need to eat more of it. Honestly, we need to get those numbers back up to the 77 numbers. We need 130 million head of cattle and 40 million sheep. I mean, that's what we need to be striving for.
Not only to mention that, but the grazing impacts and the wildfire mitigation and all the soil health. I mean,
California, hell, run some sheep and go
there.
Just chew all that stupid forest
down.
No,
but that's the stupidity of it all. Because for years and years, these places that continue to burn in California year after year were actually historically the best grazing ground for that time of the year for the sheep and the goats in the western United States. But yet they don't do it. And yet they blame climate change for these things burning when in fact it's poor management. When we could in fact be raising food and feeding people healthily with the same. It makes no sense. And this is the lunacy in the policy creation, especially when it comes to California. And it doesn't matter what part of the world you go to right now. You look at the United Kingdom, you look at Europe, it doesn't matter where you go. It is an all-out onslaught against red meat, and I can't help but believe that it's on purpose.
No, I think it is for sure. I mean, I think there's just a few people that are very short-sighted. They're looking at how much money they can make, and damned if destroys half the damn planet, in the process, or the health of half the planet. And they believe, that technology is going to save us, and we're going to create we're going to create protein out of the nitrogen in the air or something like that, and somehow we're going to dissociate our species from who we are. We're going to feed ourselves this novel, invented factory magical food, and somehow it's not going to have a negative health impact on us, and clearly it's going to destroy
Sure, it
people.
is. And you and I know that, and hopefully we can continue to spread this message. Dr. Baker, thank you for joining me. If there's one thing you could leave with people when it comes to red meat, what would that be?
Embrace it. It's a health food, superfood, best food you can eat. Eat more of it. We should all be eating more of it. I mean, the fact that the average American's eating 2 ounces a day is abysmally low. I eat something like 3 pounds a day. So we need to get those rookie numbers. Got to pump those numbers up, folks. So let's get the average person, man, eat a pound a day. Pound a day, beef, lamb, whatever. That would be a good start.
Amen. Thank you again for joining me, my friend, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know when we release a new episode. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.